The school on the outskirts of the city has long been considered a place where no human foot has set foot. The front door was boarded up, the windows were covered with wooden shields, and the yard was overgrown with grass. Local residents said that after the school was closed, strange sounds began to come from it, rustles, metal creaks and seemingly footsteps. However, it all seemed like children's horror stories, until one day a group of teenagers decided to get inside. The official reason for the closure of the school remained a mystery. The archive said that the building was recognized as an emergency, but many knew that long before that, the educational process was strange. Teachers were fired one by one, students were transferred to other schools, and the last months of work were accompanied by constant checks. Parents complained about the deterioration of children's behavior. Some teenagers started talking about a room where you can't go in. No one knew exactly what it was about, but the rumors spread quickly. Liz, her brother Evan and their friend Mark used to go to this school. They often joked about how ominous the atmosphere in the building seemed. But it was after its closure that their interest peaked. What really happened outside these walls? Why didn't any of the former school staff want to tell the truth? Their guesses did not give rest until they decided to check everything themselves. One night, armed with flashlights and cameras, teenagers entered the school grounds. The fence surrounding the building was broken in several places, making entry easy. The front door was ajar, as if someone had already been inside. "Do you think it's a guard?" Liz asked, feeling her voice tremble. "If there's a guard here, he's obviously not in a hurry," Mark replied, putting the camera in his pocket. Evan turned on the flashlight and illuminated the hallway. The floor was covered with thick dust, and the air was heavy, with a smell of dampness. The walls were decorated with children's drawings, but their bright colors had long faded, and the paper began to tear at the edges. "You know, this place is more like a museum," Mark giggled nervously. "Or a scene for a horror movie," Liz added. As they went deeper into the building, the silence became increasingly tense. The corridors were long and narrow, with classrooms that went into darkness. In one of them, teenagers found old desks with initials and strange symbols carved on them. "Are these pentagrams?" Mark asked, examining the scratched lines. "Come on, it's just a scribble," Liz said, although her voice sounded uncertain. They continued their research until they came across a door with a sign, "Technical Staff." The door was locked, but Mark easily dealt with it using a screwdriver that he had brought from home. Inside was a small room with shelves filled with dusty folders and tools. There was an old magazine on one of the shelves. Liz took it and flipped through the pages. Most of them were filled with repair records, but the last ones looked unusual. One of the teachers, judging by the signature, complained about problems with students. "Children are getting too nervous." 5 students complain of nightmares. 4 of them started skipping classes without explaining the reason. Their behavior changes and they refuse to talk to adults. "I consider the intervention of specialists necessary." There was a short note on the other page. "It is necessary to restrict access to room number 15. It's important for their safety." Evan frowned. "Does anyone remember this room?" "No," Liz replied. "But if it's important for their safety, then maybe we should check it out." Evan looked at the magazine, rereading the entry about room number 15, and froze. "Are you sure you want to go there?" Liz tried to look confident, but there was fear in her voice. "We came here for a reason," he replied, putting the magazine in his pocket. "If there was something in room number 15, we will find it." The corridor leading to the indicated room was long and narrow. The linoleum underfoot crunched with age, and the ceiling panels had collapsed in some places, exposing pipes and wires. The teenagers' lanterns picked out peeling walls and cobwebbed corners from the darkness. The number 15 was written on a rusty metal plaque. The door did not open immediately. Evan and Mark leaned on it with their shoulders, and it creaked open. Inside, chaos reigned, overturned desks, scattered notebooks, and a rusty metal cabinet lying on the floor. But the strangest thing was that there was a big old castle in the middle of the room. Someone seriously wanted to lock this place up, Mark said, bending down and examining the broken device. Liz was looking around the room. There were maps and posters on the walls, but many of them had been cut with a knife or torn. One of the desks caught her attention. It was covered with brownish-red spots, long dried and ingrained in the wood. This blood? She whispered, taking a step back. Mark came closer and ran his finger over the stain. I'm not sure, but it looks like it. Evan, looking around the closet, came across a stack of old notes. Many of them were ruined by moisture, but one was almost intact. He began to read aloud. The experiment is over. The children won't be able to talk about it anymore. Do not approach the room unless absolutely necessary. What kind of experiment? He muttered. Before they could discuss what they had read, a piece of plaster fell from the ceiling, crashing into the center of the room. There was something strange underneath it, like a box or a secret recess. Mark was the first to rush to dig out the garbage, exposing an old hatch closed with a rusted bolt. It looked heavy, but after a little puffing, the guys managed to open it. The hatch smelled cold and musty. What is it? A cellar? Liz asked, looking down. More like a basement, Mark replied. The stairs down were made of metal, but some of the steps were rusted, threatening to collapse underfoot. One by one, the teenagers descended into the dark tunnel. The basement turned out to be a maze of concrete corridors with low ceilings. What do you think? Why do you need such a basement? Evan asked. A shelter? Or a warehouse? Liz suggested. The corridors were getting narrower, the air heavier. Lanterns picked out doors with massive bolts from the darkness. The word "closed" was written on one of them in red paint. That's a great sign, Mark muttered, pushing open the door. It creaked as it opened a small camera. There was a dirty metal chair in the corner with straps attached to it. A cracked helmet lay on the floor, with black liquid dripping from inside. Is this torture? Liz asked, startled. Mark looked around the room until his hand accidentally pressed a lever against the wall. There was a screeching sound, and a second later something massive fell with a crash in the corridor behind them. What was that? Liz screamed, turning around. They ran out of the room and saw the collapsed ceiling blocking the way back. We're stuck, Evan whispered. Then the corridor went into darkness. They had no choice but to go forward. After a few steps, Mark suddenly screamed, slipped and fell. What's the matter with you? Evan shone the flashlight on his hand. There was a deep cut wound on his palm. There's glass everywhere, be careful, Mark said, squeezing his hand. But before they could catch their breath, a metallic knock sounded from the depths of the basement. Who's here? Liz screamed, trembling. There was no response. But the knock was repeated. Evan clenched his fists and pointed the flashlight in the direction of the sound. They saw something quickly disappear around the corner. Is this a man? Liz whispered. Or something worse, Mark replied. The knocking in the basement was getting louder, as if someone was deliberately trying to get their attention. Liz clutched the lantern so tightly that her fingers turned white, and Mark, clutching his injured hand, walked behind the others, looking around. We need to get out of here. This is the place, wrong, she whispered. But as they turned the corner, they froze. Ahead, illuminated by the dim light of their lanterns, stood a man. He didn't move, but his eyes glittered in the dark, as if he had just seen his prey. Who are you? Evan shouted, trembling with tension. The man stepped forward, his boots echoing loudly on the concrete walls. It was the thin, tall school janitor they had seen earlier. He was holding a heavy metal pipe in his hands. "I should have known which one of you was stronger," he said in a cold, even voice. "What are you talking about?" Liz blurted out. "You like to think that you are brave. But here's the question, what are you willing to do to survive?" Evan felt a chill run down his spine. This man was clearly not going to help them. "You won't get out. This basement is my territory. And there are rules here," the janitor continued, slowly walking around them. Mark rushed forward, trying to grab the man by the pipe, but he was faster. The pipe whistled down on his arm, there was a crunch, and the guy screamed in pain. "No, no, no, not so fast. No one leaves here for nothing," said the janitor, wiping the blood from the pipe on his dirty apron. "What do you want?" Liz cried out, hiding her tears behind a trembling voice. "I want to understand which of you is ready to kill to survive." The teenagers were silent, stunned by the words. "You three. One of you has to stay. This is the rule. We won't play your games." Evan shouted, snatching the pipe from Mark's hands and rushing forward. But the cleaner was faster. With one sharp movement, he hit the guy in the chest, causing him to collapse to the floor, writhing in pain. "Run away!" Evan screamed, clutching at a broken rib. But there was nowhere to run. There was a landslide behind, only concrete walls and death ahead. Liz rushed to the nearest door, yanking it open. There was another cell behind it, but there were chains and hooks on the walls. The blood dried on the floor in dark pools. "This is your future if you don't make a choice," the janitor said, coming closer. He threw a rusty knife on the floor. "Decide who stays. You have 3 minutes." Liz, Evan, and Mark froze. Their breathing echoed down the hallway. We can't do this," Liz cried. "We can all get out," Mark replied, but his voice was shaking. The janitor was watching them like he was studying lab rats. 2 minutes, he said, swinging the pipe. Evan gripped the knife, his fingers sliding over the bloody blade. "He won't let us live. Even if we choose, he will kill everyone," he said, looking straight into the janitor's eyes. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm a man of my word. Do you want to check?" "We have no other choice," Mark whispered, grabbing Liz's hand. "I'm sorry, but it needs to be done." Liz looked at him, her eyes wide with horror. "Are you serious?" Mark nodded, and before she could react, he snatched the knife from Evan. The blade flashed, but Liz managed to push it away, stumbling over the pipe. "That's enough," she screamed, her voice echoing in the silence. "If we start killing each other, we've already lost." The janitor chuckled. "Time's up." He stepped forward, swinging the pipe. Liz screamed, Evan rushed forward, and everything plunged into chaos. The basement was filled with the sounds of fighting, blows, and screams. When silence finally fell, the floor was covered in blood, and only one of the teenagers got out of the tunnel to the surface. After the basement floor was once again plunged into dead silence, Liz stood in the middle of a bloody scene. Her hands were shaking, her breathing was ragged, and there was an expression of utter despair on her face. Her body ached from her wounds, but the fear outweighed any physical pain. She leaned heavily against the wall, pressing her hand to the wound on her shoulder, and slowly moved down the corridor, leaving bloody footprints behind her. The janitor's words echoed in my head like the echoes of some perverted echo. The corridors of the basement seemed endless. Liz started to lose her bearings, but suddenly noticed a door ajar to the side. She pushed it with her shoulder, and the faint light of the lantern picked out something strange inside. It was a small room with several old drawers, a table, and a pile of papers. There were pictures of students, teachers, and school staff on the walls. Liz came closer and saw that the faces in the photos were crossed out with red paint. There was a battered notebook in the center of the table. She took it with trembling hands and began to leaf through it. Number 47. The fear of death is partially manifested. Continue monitoring. Number 48. Broken after pressure. He showed an interesting reaction. Leave a note. Number 49. The mental breakdown occurred faster than expected. I cleaned up on my own. These notes looked like the diary of some sadist watching someone else suffer. The pages were littered with random phrases and comments, as if the janitor was ticking off his experiments. Liz fought back the urge to vomit, but the last entry caught her attention. The last group. We need to complete the experiment. There is no way back. She dropped her notebook and tried to get out of the room. My gaze caught on a large closet in the corner. There were dents on the outside, as if someone had tried to break it out from the inside. Gathering her strength, she tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. She searched around and found a rusty crowbar on the floor. A few blows and the door opened with a screech. There was an eerie sight inside, the folded bodies of several students. There were rope marks on their wrists, and their faces were distorted with horror. Liz felt her legs give way. But she couldn't stop. She had to figure out who this janitor was and why he was doing this. When she reached the next staircase, Liz heard a voice from above. He sounded calm and even friendly. "Take your time, you deserve a little break," came a voice from above. It was him. The janitor was standing at the top of the stairs. His hands were covered in blood, but his face remained calm, almost satisfied. "Why are you doing this?" Liz screamed. "Who are you anyway?" The man chuckled. "Nobody. Just a janitor. Everyone has their own hobbies, right? Someone collects stamps, someone does sports, and I do. I study people." Liz felt her insides tighten. "You're sick." Oh, how corny it is. Everyone likes to put labels on when they don't understand what's going on. But honestly, I don't need your excuses or explanations. You survived. That's all that matters. His voice was full of mockery, but there was something cold and frightening behind it. They'll find you. Everything you've done will be revealed. Liz shouted, stepping back. The janitor laughed. Will they find it? Oh, I'd like to see that. He went down a few steps, and Liz, gathering all her strength, rushed up. She almost reached the exit, but something strange stopped her. At the exit, she was met by school guards. They immediately called the police, and Liz thought it was finally over. But a few hours later, while sitting in the hospital, a detective approached her. We checked the database. We don't have any record of this cleaner. Moreover, the surveillance cameras did not record his appearance at the school. Are you sure you saw him? Liz froze. Her mind was gripped by fear. Did all this really happen? And then she remembered the photos, the notebook, the closet. Everything was real. But now it's left there. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories.